All right. Well, hello. So, yes, my name is Josie, and I'm a registered dietitian with the St. Luke's Lifestyle Medicine Department. And today we're talking about everyone's favorite topic this time of year, it seems like weight loss. So, this is a class, Eat More, Weigh Less, that I teach regularly over here to our patients at Lifestyle Medicine. And I'm going to share some of the content with you today. And I was talking with Jasmine at the beginning. This is usually at least an hour, and I've really tried to condense it. So I'll try to get it done in a half hour. If you need to jump off, you won't hurt my feelings. It will be recorded, so you can check that out too. So hopefully we can get it all in 30 minutes. Okay. Okay. So where I like to start this presentation is looking at some statistics on weight loss and diet programs, because it's a little discouraging, but I think it kind of makes people feel like maybe they're not alone with some of this stuff, because research shows that diets have a 98% failure rate within 2 years, which means that people go on a diet, they lose a certain amount of weight, but all of that weight is regained within 2 years. They have a very, very low success rate. On average right now, I think it's like 14 million Americans go on a diet every single year, and the weight loss industry makes a ton of money. It's like a $73 billion industry. And despite all these different diets and programs and experts on weight loss and all this type of stuff, people are heavier than ever before. The obesity rate, overweight and obesity rate is at almost, 74% in adults here in the US. So something obviously isn't working with all these different diet programs out there, the, failure rate, all of that. So why do they fail? How come it is so difficult to lose weight that lasts? And a big reason is a lot of these diets focus on the same thing, which is calorie restriction, because we know that if you eat less calories in a day than you burn, you will lose weight. And most diets, when you start restricting calories, you start restricting portion size. So portions get smaller, our meals get smaller, and we get hungry at some point. We struggle with cravings, and we even can risk, nutrient deficiencies. And that becomes very challenging to stick with. You're only so motivated for so long. And this topic around diets that don't last was really sparked with the study that was done on the Biggest Loser participants. So if you're unfamiliar, Biggest Loser was a very, very popular weight loss competition show that was on NBC, that was on for like over a decade. Anyway, so it was a weight loss competition show. And in 2016, a team of researchers went back and interviewed the people and contestants that had been on the show to see, were they successful in keeping off all this weight that they lost when they were on the show. So what they did is they kind of crunched numbers, and I put it up here so you can see it in actual pounds. But what they found was that when people were on the competition show, average weight loss was about 127 pounds. But when they did this follow-up study in 2016, they found that people regained an average of 90 pounds back, which is pretty significant, and went back to, not quite to the weight they started at, but pretty darn close. For all that weight they lost, a lot of it came back. And why? There's this big question going around. And number one, the lifestyle was really hard to keep up with. While they were on the show, contestants reported exercising multiple times a day and eating a very, very calorie restricted diet. And two, we'll look down here at this RMR measured, but contestants suffered metabolic consequences because of this rapid weight loss program, this very restrictive caloric intake. And that's what this is showing down here is your RMR measured. So your RMR is a calculation of how many calories you burn at rest. So even if you're, laying in a bed all day long, there's still a baseline amount of calories that you're going to burn, because calories are energy, and we need that energy for our heart to be, your brain to work, liver to regenerate. All of the basic stuff requires calories. And they found in the study in 2016 that people's RMR had gone down by 704 calories on average. So naturally at rest, these people are burning, 700 plus calories less every single day, despite the fact that their weight rebounded almost where it was. So it's pretty common, if you lose weight, your RMR will come down. But if the weight comes back up, the RMR should be coming back up too. And that just was not found in these people. So that's part of the challenge as well. And we know this whole slide basically is just summarizing that a lot of this has been repeated in a lot of different studies, and we know that any diet that results in a calorie deficit will result in weight loss, but it rarely lasts. So, the question comes, it's like, okay, so what do we do? Why does our body make it so difficult to lose weight and keep it off? And this quote really does a good job of summarizing it from David Levinsky from Cornell. The body has had many, many years to develop mechanisms to resist starvation. You can't bypass them simply by going on a diet. And what this is saying is food is fuel. And up until honestly recently, maybe in the last 100 years, one of the biggest threats to humans and mankind for the longest time was starvation. And because of this, our body has created all these mechanisms to make us want to eat when we're in starvation mode so we can survive. And that's where this is backfiring. And unfortunately, the body doesn't know the difference between being on a calorie restricted diet and wanting to fit into, a certain size versus actual starvation. And when you've been in a state of hunger for long enough, your body starts to release these hormones, the surges of hormones to encourage you to eat. So ghrelin really comes into play here, but ghrelin is really released around the body. It's kind of the hunger hormone that's released when you've been, hungry for long enough. Ghrelin can do things such as make food smell better and make food taste better. So if you're in the presence of food, you've been on a diet for a long period of time, you're like, man, you walk into the grocery store and you can smell like the fried chicken in the deli and it just smells so good. You can't resist it. You can't get it out of your brain. When you're eating food, it tastes really good. These are all mechanisms to help you survive so you can eat and maybe store that food for later, and you can find food and acquire it. There's fullness hormones. So kind of the opposite of ghrelin is leptin. And when you've been on a diet for long enough, randomly leptin is suppressed and shut off. So you don't feel the feeling of fullness. So you can keep eating and keep eating again, so you can store those extra calories for later in the form of body fat, because we can use fat for energy later on. And you start to conserve calories, which means your metabolism slows down. So these are just, I think it's kind of nice to see like what's happening with the body when we go on these really calorie portion restricted diets and find, kind of see why they're not working for people. So what are we supposed to do? With all that being said, what is there anything we can do? And the answer is yes. And that's where I'm introducing calorie density, which is a much healthier way to lose weight. And a lot of people report it's a more effortless and enjoyable approach to weight loss because you're eating satisfying portions of food. You're just choosing to fill up on foods that take up the most space in your stomach for the fewest calories. And so when we look at some of these charts that I'm going to show you, you're going to see a measurement by weight for certain calories of food. So this here is showing you for a pound of these different foods, this is how many calories that you get. And I'll kind of explain this a little bit more in future slides. And I'm going to show you some really fun pictures of comparison here. So calorie density, you can see these two images. Both of these are showing you the exact same amount of calories, but you're getting much different quantities of food. Both of these are 1,575 calories, but you're getting a lot more food, larger portions over here than these, which I would consider more empty types of calories. So why does the calorie density approach work? We'll start here. So research shows, like when we take people and we put them in the research setting, people eat pretty consistently the same weight of food day after day, regardless of calories. So I tell people this all the time. We don't have like a magic numerical tracking system in the body that tells us that we've consumed 1,700 calories and that's what we need to survive. It's not about that. It's about filling up and putting a certain weight and volume in the stomach day after day. And on average, we actually eat somewhere between 3 and 5 pounds of food every day. And that number that we kind of stick to is pretty darn consistent. So like maybe I eat like 3.5 pounds of food, or maybe 4, but we're very, very consistent about that. And so this is where we can kind of trick the system by eating some of these low energy dense foods that take up a lot of space, so we can be full and satisfied, tell the body to stop eating for the fewest amount of calories. And so it doesn't trigger all those mechanisms that I was talking about kind of towards the beginning with the hormones and starvation mode. Okay. So these are the foods we want to focus on. So this is showing you the approximate food calories per pound. And remember, we're somewhere between 3 and 5 pounds of food a day. Pound of leafy greens. This is the lowest, 100 calories per pound on average. So these foods will be the lowest in calories and take up the most space. I love the example of like a head of iceberg lettuce. People are always like, oh, there's nothing to it. It's not even good for us. Well, it's volume, right? And there are nutrients in there. But a head of iceberg lettuce is about 60 calories. And then you get into like romaine, maybe that's like 70, 75. But on average, we're looking at somewhere between, 50, 100 calories per pound. And then you move up to vegetables, 200 calories per pound. Fruits on average are about 300 calories per pound. And then you get into some of the whole grains, the beans, and then some of the higher fat plant foods, avocado, nuts, some beans. Meats and cheeses fall somewhere in the middle. And then really where it gets high is the processed foods, the refined, with the refined sugars, the added oil, the salt, all the extra additives in there. And then the highest calorie food that exists on the planet, the food that will give you the most calories and take up the least amount of space, is going to be pure fat. So oil, excuse me, oil is in that category. Butter, lard, if you were to eat just a visible, the chunk of fat off a piece of meat, that's 100% pure fat. That will be the highest. And so patients of mine, they like to take pictures of this and maybe hang it on the fridge. These are the foods that we want to focus on, first and foremost. And then think of these types of foods as like a garnish, and then having these as, least often as possible. We do a lot of oil-free cooking at Lifestyle Medicine because that does save people a lot of calories. But where a lot of this comes in is actually processed food. It's just kind of super saturated in there, and you don't even know it's there. Okay. So why do plants weigh the most for the fewest calories? Well, it's because they are mostly made of this magical ingredient called fiber and water. Plants are mostly fiber and water. And so both of those take up a lot of space. They weigh a lot, but they don't contribute to calories. Water does not, we know that, has 0 calories, but so does fiber. It's indigestible part of a plant that we cannot ingest and contribute to calorie load. So it's kind of like a filler that's in all of these foods naturally. And when fiber is in the presence of water, it bulks up, swells up, it takes up a lot of space, and then it goes out the back door at some point. And that's what the kind of the magic is here. And that's what makes these foods have so much volume for so few calories. So just some more fun pictures to look at. So exact same amount of calories. You can have a bag of chips and a Slurpee, or this massive platter of fruits and vegetables here. And I think it would be, challenging to eat that much, especially if you're looking at like snack foods. That's a lot. I feel like I would be pretty tired of eating after getting through like half of that. Processed foods, I meant to put this up earlier, but processed foods are the most calorie dense foods. They will take up the least amount of space in your stomach for the most calories. Fats and sugars are empty calories. They're very loaded in calories. And they're just the calories in processed foods. Even when they do research where they make a processed meal and then they have more of a, like an unprocessed meal, and it's the same calories, it's the same fat content, same carbs, same protein. People on average consume, I think, 500 more calories when they're presented with processed foods, because I think there's a couple of different things going on. They taste super yummy. They've got the sugar, salt, and fat, which encourages overeating. They don't require very much chewing. They go down a lot quicker. And as far as digestion goes, I always refer to processed foods as they're almost pre-digested. When they hit the stomach acid, because they're so refined, when they hit the stomach acid, they break down very quickly. They don't stay in the stomach for very long, and they, kind of go through the stomach fast, so we don't feel full for a long period of time, so we can keep eating and keep eating. And then, some of this stuff encourages us to overeat. So here's an example of how processing adds calories. People often think that potatoes are not part of like a healthy diet and that they're fattening, and they get a really bad rap, but potatoes are good. We like potatoes. However, it's what we add to the potatoes that's really driving up the calories. The number one way people eat potatoes, obviously in the US, is in the form of French fries. And then the number two way is like a baked potato. And unfortunately, potatoes don't taste very good on their own. So we've got to add stuff to them, right? So, you add the oil or you add the butter, the cheese, the sour cream. That's what really drives up the calories. Potatoes on their own, as you can see here, 3.5 medium russet potatoes is about 380 calories. And if you put it on a scale, this is the weight in grams. Or a medium-sized French fry, which is like a quarter the weight of food, for 365 calories. That's what really takes it up. If you can eat a plain potato, that's great. They're also very, very satiating. They fill you up and they're a good energy source. It's like one of my favorite things to eat before I go mountain biking is potatoes, because I feel like I have such good energy when I eat them. But that's where I kind of encourage people, if you're, sweet potatoes, a little bit easier because they actually taste really good on their own. So you don't have to dress them up quite as much, or just finding ways to cut the amount of oil and fats used when you do make potatoes. Okay, sweet stuff. Sweet treats are typically loaded with empty calories because of the added sugar and fats that are in them. Chocolate, candy, ice cream take up very little space in the stomach and they'll pack a lot of calories. So I try to encourage people to curb their sweet tooth with fruit, which at first it's not the same, but pretty quickly you start to see the benefit because fruit actually gives you the feeling of fullness, and it takes a while to break down and digest in the stomach. So it keeps you fuller longer. Fruit weighs a lot. You're not getting a ton of calories when you do eat it. But this is a pretty good example why. This is a heavy calorie ice cream. This is a half a cup. For one serving here has 360 calories, or you could have 2 whole cantaloupe melons for 372. I think that will be a lot more filling. Fruit makes a great dessert. Another example here, 2 Oreo cookies, 110 calories, or a bowl, 2 cups of cubed cantaloupe. Okay, some of these are kind of fun to look at. 300 calories. You can have 32 ounces, so it's not just that small container, but the big 32 ouncer of fresh strawberries, or 3.5 ounces, a little bit less than half a cup of trail mix. And a lot of people think trail mix is a dieting food. And yeah, it's a lot healthier choice than if you're at a vending machine. It's healthier to get that than like a candy bar, but it's also a pretty concentrated source of calories. I mean, that's why it's called trail mix, is it's great for hiking. So you don't have to pack a lot of weight and you can get a lot of calories in. But dried fruit and nuts are pretty calorie dense. So I recommend cautioning these if you're trying to lose weight. The fruit and dried fruit and nuts. And this one, yeah, this shows you a good example too. So 150 calories. You can have half a cup of dried apricots or 9 whole apricots. And there's nothing added to these. People are always like, oh yeah, because they added sugar. Well, sometimes they do, but in this case, they didn't. This is literally just when you take the pit out and dehydrate and, remove the water content from the apricot. This is just 9 shrunken down apricots. That's how much it shrinks down to a half a cup. So again, fresh is better. You've got the water content in there, requires more chewing. It kind of slows you down. It takes up more space initially when it hits the stomach. So fresh is best. And then this is kind of showing you almost the opposite of the last example, where we had the fiber and calorie content of the fruit, but all the water was taken out. And then this example has the calorie and water content with all the fiber removed. When you juice a food, it's removing the fiber. And that is a precious ingredient that all of us need more of. That's what's going to make us feel full and satisfied. So for 500 calories here, you could have 5 whole large apples, or this is 36 ounces of apple juice. And the apples obviously would be a lot more filling and satiating, and it would be hard to eat 5 apples, in my opinion. Okay, so I typically show a video here, but I'm gonna have Jasmine link you to that. It's a YouTube video. It's really just kind of does a good job of sending the message home. So moving forward, I think, as we are trying to eat healthier, make an attempt to maximize those foods that are 600 calories per pound or less. And I'll have these slides for you so we can go back to that initial chart that I showed you. but those are the ones that we want to focus on first and foremost. The leafy greens, the non-starchy vegetables, the fruits, the starchy vegetables, the whole unprocessed grains like quinoa, brown rice, wild rice, wheat berries, and beans. Beans are super high in fiber and a good protein source. They're very, very filling and satiating. So trying to focus on those because they are so filling, they're difficult to overeat. So kind of try to make that the base of most of your meals. And then again, trying to think of the meats and cheeses as a garnish. And then the processed food, trying to remove those as much as possible. So then, we've got 8 minutes left. So I'm going to go through some of these additional tips on top of what I was just talking about for weight loss that I like to talk to people about. So tip number one, some of this is just like technique type stuff. So eat until you feel comfortably full. We shouldn't be starving, but we shouldn't be stuffing ourselves. Kind of a good rule of thumb is feeling 80% full and trying to get better in tune with your body's fullness cues. And that's why eating more of these, low calorie dense foods are helpful because we actually feel the feeling of satiation. Slow down and practice what's called the 20-minute rule. It takes about 20 minutes before you start to activate those fullness cues and the response of your stomach stretching out and relaying the message to your brain and hormones releasing it. That whole process can take 20 minutes. So try to make mealtime last 20 minutes. I told people you can set a timer, set your fork down between bites, try to have undistracted meals. So oftentimes when we're eating through our lunch break or watching webinars through our lunch break, just kidding. We tend to overeat because we're not really paying attention. And this is a tough practice for people to get into, is just focusing on the meal, not playing on your phone, not watching TV. So it's good, kind of a little goal to set for yourself, but slowing down and having mindful meals. Staying hydrated, which I'm going to have a sip right now. Staying hydrated, we know, is good for our health, but it's also good for our weight because number one, water can fill us up. It kind of binds to fiber in the stomach, and it expands, and that creates even more of the feeling of fullness. It can help curb food cravings, especially if you're kind of a snacky person and you feel snacky cravings. Sometimes we confuse being hungry with being thirsty. And in the research, they say that 37% of the time people mistake thirst for being hungry. So sometimes it's good to drink like 16 ounces of water and take like a 10-minute beat, and see how you feel. Sometimes our body's just like, I'm thirsty, but we're like, oh, we can put food in. Food often has water in it, so we get some satisfaction from that. But it's great for that, but also it can increase and boost metabolism. Studies show that drinking 2 cups of water produces a surge of the adrenal hormone called norepinephrine, which is the same hormone that's released if you're a smoker, or if you drink large amounts of caffeine, which they say can boost metabolism by 30% within an hour. So I recommend trying to get in the habit of drinking like 16 ounces of water before each meal. And, there's all these water trackers that you can do, but being hydrated is not only good for our health, but our weight. And with that being said, avoid drinking your calories. They just don't fill us up for the amount of calories we can get. The soda, coffee beverages, Gatorade, energy drink. I mean, there's just endless list of sugar sweetened caloric beverages anymore. But they can easily add 2, 5, 6, 800 calories to every day and not fill you up. So cutting back on these is recommended. And then, lately I've been getting lots of questions about artificial sweeteners, and I just encourage people to not think of them as a free food because we still have a lot of research and figuring out to do with these. But some of what we do know is they can disrupt your microbiome or that good bacteria. Those artificial sweeteners can kind of kill off some of that population, but they can also increase cravings for sweets. They have a very potent sweet taste, and they can kind of perpetuate these cravings and the desire for sweet treats. Some studies show that they increase cravings for just simple carbs because your body thought you were going to get sugar and you didn't. And so there's kind of this like, okay, got to make that feeling up. So I just try to stick to water, infused water, sparkling waters can be great, and really try to stay away from the sweet stuff and the artificially sweet stuff. So preload meals, I think this is my favorite ones. Preload meals with low calorie dense foods. So starting a meal with these low energy dense foods, like a piece of fruit, a salad without all the cheese and ranch and all that on there, just a very basic leafy green salad, or like a broth-based vegetable soup, can be helpful as an like an appetizer. Think of it like that. Because research shows that when you start a meal with these guys, it reduces overall calorie consumption because you start that feeling of fullness, it's taking up space, helps decrease cravings. This is a really good rule of thumb if you're easily tempted when you go out to eat. Like, this is something I'll do. If you go out to eat and you're really hungry, you're you're going to make poor decisions. Everything looks good. You want the biggest thing on the menu. So having a piece of fruit or two, or starting with a little salad before you even look at the menu, can be helpful. And in the research setting, they've seen this is very helpful. Just to break this down quickly, this was done by Penn State, I believe. Yeah, it was Penn State. And so they had three groups of people. And in the first group, they gave them all the same size plate of pasta. And they just said, okay, freely eat it. Let us know when you're full. And they were able to kind of average up the amount of calories consumed. And they saw maybe it was like 850 calories here. When they're just presented pasta, that's what people eat. Then in the intervention group, they gave them a little side salad, teeny tiny, not very big at all, had them eat that first. Then they gave them that same plate of pasta that they did with the first group. And they found that even though they're technically being presented with more food, less calories were consumed when they had that little salad first. And then the bigger the salad, that's what this third group is showing, the less overall consumed. So this is good for, especially lunch and dinner. If you're having more indulgent meals, preload with low energy dense foods. Okay, front load your calories. It's the beginning of the year, new you. Try to get back into the habit of eating breakfast. So many people skip breakfast. What I've been hearing a lot lately is people are intermittent fasting, but they're just skipping breakfast. And that's not really how that works. Intermittent fasting works best if you eat earliest in the day, and then the latter part of the day is when you should be doing the fasting. That's where you're going to see the benefit. You can actually burn a lot of calories when you sleep if you go to bed more of a fasted state. So try to make breakfast the biggest. If you can't make breakfast the biggest meal, I can feel you on that one. Make lunch the biggest, and then really try to taper your meal size at the end of the day. Dinner should be the smallest. 85% of your calories should be consumed before 4 p.m. It's a good rule of thumb. But this is helpful for weight loss. Oftentimes people eat the opposite. You eat all this food right before bedtime. Cravings kick in more in the evening if you have gone all day without food. Again, food is fuel. We should be eating it earlier on in the day to fuel us through the day, and then kind of winding down towards the evening time. Limit snacking. Research shows that overall, the more often people eat, the more calories they eat and heavier they tend to be. One reason being is people really underestimate how many calories they're eating from snacks. Another reason being is there is actually metabolic benefit to it's not technically fasting, but letting your body go several hours without being in this digesting and eating state all the time. That's when you start to see the burn, is when you haven't been eating. If you're constantly in what's called this fed state, your body doesn't need to use any of those reserves, right? And so, people that tend to have the healthiest body weights, when we look at, longevity studies, people that live the longest and just overall healthier people, they're not really snackers. But unfortunately, here in the US, we're just part of this like snacking, grazing culture. A lot of younger people just kind of graze all day long and don't have the, allotted meal times. But there is something to that. And this is conflicting with this popular nutrition message that's been around forever. That's like, oh, you need to eat constantly so your metabolism is revved up and firing. There's not really any data to show that. My maybe a conspiracy is that the snack food industry created that message and spread it on the Today Show and magazines. Who knows? But the data doesn't show it. There is benefit to going, couple hours, 4 or 5 hours between meals without eating. Lets your body kind of rest, digest, rest, and then maybe tap into some of those reserves. Have a plan. Getting into meal planning is huge. There's a lot of great meal planning apps out there. Batch cooking, or just doing some preparing ahead of time for yourself for the week. But above all, try to keep it simple. Don't overwhelm yourself too quickly. But having a plan is really important. And there are some great meal kits out there if you're looking for just a quick start and you hate cooking. This example you see images of is from a company called Splendid Spoon. These are all going to be more whole food, plant-based, those very low energy dense types of foods. And these are quite yummy, but you pay to play with these. These can be kind of pricey. Okay, just a few more here. Remove flour from your diet. I think if we were just to do this alone, we'd probably see some weight loss. And I'm not just talking about gluten. This is all flour-based foods. Now that we have the whole gluten-free movement, we've got a bunch of flour alternatives. Rice flour, chickpea, almond, all of those. If you think about it, with the grains, especially the whole grain, it's dried, then it's ground and milled, and it really breaks up a lot of the fiber and the resistant starches that are really beneficial to making us feel full and satisfied. And then they're pressed and condensed into shapes and makes them even more calorie dense. The reason why a lot of people actually have success with gluten-free eating with weight loss and they're like, oh, I feel better, is because they cut out a lot of processed foods, whether or not they have that sensitivity. There's a lot of foods you can't eat if you can't have wheat. It's a staple of a huge percent of what we buy at the store. So this is cereals and crackers and noodles and breads and rolls and all of that. Cutting back on flour and just going for the real grain stuff, having quinoa, brown rice, wheat berries, farro, bulgur. Those are good for you. Those are not flour. Those are just different types of grains. Those would be better. And you cook them in water, so then they've got a lot of fiber and water content. This just shows you kind of the comparison of the calorie density here. 500 grams. So if you put these on the scale, they weigh the same. And in the stomach, they weigh the same. 500 grams of potatoes is 385 calories. Potatoes have a lot of water too. And then 500 grams of these like thin sliced whole wheat bread actually has almost 1,200 calories. Again, not any water content, kind of compact calories. Fresh is always best. Fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh whole grains, beans. And then lastly is replace, don't remove. Finding healthier alternatives to some of these foods, snacks, treats that we enjoy. This might be an easier transition. It's really easy for me to sit here and say, okay, just stop snacking. But if you eat several snacks every single night while you're watching your favorite TV show, that's a habit and it's tough to break habits. And so maybe finding healthier alternatives is better. So instead of doing like ice cream, can you do a nice big bowl of fruit with like a little bit, a quarter of the amount of ice cream that you normally do, or maybe you can get some whipped cream and put it on there, or maybe even better, you can just be satisfied by eating a ton of mixed fruit or whatever it is that you like. Or if you're used to more savory, snacky, crunchy type stuff, veggies work well, veggies and hummus, maybe like air pop popcorn. If you got an air fryer, maybe you can roast up, potatoes, sweet potatoes, munch on those without all the oil. Instead of doing potato chips, finding healthier beverage alternatives. And even with recipes too, there's healthier swaps for all of this. We saw the difference between, beans and the calorie density of meat, even though meat on average isn't as high as some of the processed foods. You can save several hundred, 400 or 500 calories by putting lentils in spaghetti sauce instead of doing ground beef, or having portobello mushroom burger instead of ground beef on there. Is going to save you a ton of calories. So those little swaps over time can really help save. And so that might be a better way to go. Okay. And then lastly, I think it's nice to look at like balance. And when you're building a plate, this is the way. This is the way to go. Is half of your plate should be those non-starchy fruits or vegetables. Breakfast is probably more going to look like fruit. Although I've been really into breakfast salads lately. Call me crazy, but I've been enjoying greens and tomatoes and avocado in the morning. But half of your plate should be fruits or vegetables, non-starchy ideally here. And then a quarter of your plate coming from whole unprocessed grains, like the stuff we can buy from the bulk section at Winco, or starchy veggies. So this could be, potatoes, sweet potatoes. And then a quarter of the plate coming from protein. And when we talk about what's the leanest type of protein, the lowest fat, lowest calorie type of protein you can get, it's going to be the beans, the legumes, the garbanzos, black beans, kidney beans, split peas, lentils, tofu, edamame, if you want to dabble in those, or just trying to keep your protein meat as lean as possible. Boneless, skinless chicken breasts, fish, but portion size matters here. Portion size is supposed to be about the size of a deck of cards. So maybe you find that helpful. Okay. And I believe that's it. So we didn't do too bad for time. Okay. So let me wrap it up there. Okay. Yeah, that is my final slide. So any final questions or thoughts or, oh, wow, I see there's lots of comments in here. Looks like Jasmine, you might have been interacting in there. But yeah, someone asked maybe about other classes. So yeah, our lifestyle medicine program, we have a website. It's a bundled program where we've got like 18 different courses. I know Kyle has come on here and talked with you. Mandy has done some. But all of these classes are part of the lifestyle medicine bundle, which you can check out on our page. And we just kind of work on, addressing the root cause of chronic disease and overweight and obesity, and help people live their healthiest lifestyle. And I guess that's kind of a good message to end on with this class is weight loss is not going to be a short-term fix. So many people want that, and I see the desire behind it. It's like, I just need to set 3 months of my life aside so I can lose, 20 pounds or whatever, and then I'll be happy and I'll, be able to go back to life and it will be not. But we know that doesn't work. It has to be a lifelong journey and process. And honestly, when people start focusing on tracking health measures and just trying to be healthy and eat healthy instead of focusing just on the numbers and the weight just seems to fall off. It's wild. And I've witnessed it directly with patients I've worked with, family members. It's just like when you focus on kind of the right thing, it seems to come a little bit more effortlessly too. And you're just building overall health. So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for sticking on with me a little bit past today. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah. Jasmine will send you the slides and the video link and the recording soon. Okay.
Thank you so much, Josie. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Have
Thanks
a great
for having
day.
me. Yeah.
Of
Take care,
course.
everyone. Bye.